The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, and welcome to this webinar on how to achieve a dynamic single view of the customer. I'm Paul Skeldon. I'm one of the editors at Internet Retailing, and I'll be chairing the webinar for you, which means I'm just going to go a brief introduction and then hopefully just ask all your questions at the end. Shoppers today, as many of you will know, are using all sorts of devices and channels, yet they require a very personal service. So how do you sort of create that sort of single view of them so that you can deal with them on the level they want? And today we're going to be hearing from Brett Gascoigne, who's head of UK at Session M, who are a data orchestration, engagement and loyalty company who have got some really interesting sort of approaches to how to do this. So I shall hand you over to Brett in a moment. Before I do that, those of you listening, if you want to ask any questions, we'll save them all till the end, but please do type them into the question box on the control panel, and I'll come to them once Brett's finished his presentation. So put them in whenever you feel like doing, but we'll come to answering at the end. The session is being recorded and will be distributed probably early next week on the Internet Retailing website and via our various news channels. And I'm sure that Session M will also be pushing it out too. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Brett. So Brett, take it away.
Thank you, Paul, and hello everybody. Thank you for joining this webinar today. As Paul said, my name is Brett Gascoigne and I'm head of the UK at Session M. What we're going to talk through today is around how to achieve a dynamic single view of the customer. We don't want to dive too much into Session M's technology on this, but more about actually what are the strategies that we're seeing, what are we seeing from brands that are working with us, such as Starbucks, McDonald's, Nike, Coca-Cola, and what is the best way to go about it. Also, what are the challenges? What's being faced by brands? What issues are they seeing when they try to create that single view of the customer? But more importantly, once they've got that single view, how are they acting upon it? And it's a tricky question because technology really has changed consumer expectations. And it's now what consumers are looking for is more about, I want you to know me. I want you to know who I am. I want you to anticipate what my needs are. And I want you to value me. I want you to value me for my time, value me for my business. And a lot of brands we're finding are struggling to meet these expectations because technology really is changing at such a rapid rate. And it's changing how consumers are capable of engaging with a brand and also their perception of the brand's ability to engage with them. Now, these expectations are driven by many different types of channels that didn't exist 10 to 15 years ago. I mean, there's far more channels to serve this than ever before. I mean, if we think about it, 15 years ago, social channels didn't exist. Facebook wasn't around. I mean, who remembers MySpace? I mean, this is sort of going back a bit now, and there's more and more channels are appearing. There's about 35 social networks that have their APIs open to feed channels like this. And it means brands are dealing with a far more complex environment that's got a greater potential for error than ever before. So this is where technology becomes, well, really, really important for them. It's going to be how brands will be able to leverage technology is what becomes even more important. Because the problem is, if you're not meeting the expectations of your customers, you're ultimately losing them. And a presentation wouldn't be a presentation unless we got to some percentages before the fifth slide. So we've got a couple of statistics here from Accenture and Forbes, which is showing that 50% of consumers are likely to switch brands if a company isn't anticipating their needs. But this is a tricky area because, again, how do you anticipate them? And 79% of customers will take their business to a competitor within a week of a bad customer experience. Now, you've got many channels now. Brands have online, they have physical presence, and it's about how do you tie these together? What are the barriers that are coming in here? A lot of the problems and the barriers that are preventing the brands from meeting these customer expectations actually starts with the data. When people talk to us and talk to us about some of the loyalty programs that we're powering globally and say, look, how do you approach a meaningful engagement with your customers to drive stickiness and to decrease churn? And actually the first response always has to be data. because how can you possibly engage with your customers effectively if you don't understand who they are? Now, many years ago, brands were told that big data is what was going to save the industry. Let's put all of our data into a centralized data warehouse. Let's create this single view of the customer, and let's use that information to be more effective. What they didn't state at the time was that actually this data was going to be in multiple formats. There was going to be lots of barriers here, and this was going to prevent you from meeting the customer expectations. You'd create bottlenecks would be created across different systems that brands use to engage with customers. And the problem then is that your engagement ecosystem has marketing campaigns, it has customer experiences across the web, across applications, across in-store, across commerce. There's experiences, there's online and mobile services, there's point of sale, there's products. I mean, you've got so many different data silos and pots now that we'll put about. And with data moving at a particular rate from all these systems into what's been called the 360-degree view of the customer, what's happened is all of this data has been received from different channels, put in a generalized data warehouse to create what is this perceptional, static and historical customer profile. But the difficulty is people change, and people change very, very rapidly. Their wants, their desires, their interests, their values are changing on a daily basis. Now, data that sits in a data warehouse has certain latencies depending on the channels and how quickly that data is being received. So, you know, campaigns, you need to wait 24 to 48 hours to get that information back. Experiences, you need to wait 48 hours or so. Commerce can take a couple of hours. Service can take about 48 hours. And this is in best case. Now, even though brands have a good repository of this information about the customers they're engaging with, there's still this massive gap between insight and action. And I'm sure you've seen this sort of flow before, where effectively there's a latency between the time it takes to get the data to flow from when there's an engagement or an event or a trigger, if you like, with a customer, to take that into the data warehouse and apply it to campaigns. Now, even when it comes to strategizing your adjustments to certain types of marketing campaigns or customer experience initiatives, it can take between 5 to 6 weeks between analyzing the customer segmentation to when a brand is actually capable of delivering and measuring the impact of that customer experience on those scenarios. And still what you're doing here is you're taking, let's say, a database of 2 million, let's say, for example, and breaking it down into 20 pots of 100,000. You're not getting this single customer engagement based on how they want to be engaged, at what time, in what channel, what is the event or the trigger that you need to put in front of them. What's going to be the next best action for them. We're going to talk a bit more about predictions as we go on, because this has been a buzzword for the last 10 years without really being shown how to do it effectively. But for me, segmentation is a tricky one, because I turned 40 years of age in January, and according to segmentation, I should now like cricket and I should be wearing super dry clothing. But I don't really fall into that. And this is because with segmentation, often the times you're trying to find lookalikes, when actually it should be about who's going to act alike, not who lives near someone, is the same age, of the same gender, has the same amount of children, but who is going to actually engage with this particular offer that I'm putting in front of them, or product that I'm putting in front of them. Who wants to see that at this particular time? So the latency that's being caused here is preventing this, and this is resulting in bad customer experiences. It's creating missed opportunity, and it's creating lost revenue. Now, the good news is technology has evolved so much that there is an alternative. There is the ability to move from slow and static environments, where instead of working on historical static views of the customer with slow data moving in batch between systems, you're able to actually view who the customer is, what they're doing across different channels, and this being updated in milliseconds by streaming all this data from sources into one operational view, one real-time profile. If you imagine a living, breathing user profile that effectively is having attributes put alongside it that are being placed there from events. So whenever they purchase something online, or they trip a geofence, or they buy something in store and it goes through the point of sale, all of this sits alongside them as a customer attribute. So you're understanding what they're doing across those different channels. so that when they act, you can react not only with marketing campaigns, but also with opportunities to drive them towards particular goals that you might have around a customer experience, as well as triggering off of behaviors. Now, if you imagine the experience you could give a customer where Mary decides to buy a dress online that morning. Now, she's been told that it will be delivered to her in 5 days' time. That afternoon, she's walking down the high street. She trips a geofence for the store that she's bought off online. They see it's Mary, and they can actually push her a notification to invite her in store so that she can actually collect the dress that she bought that morning and not have to wait 5 days. And the chances are that Mary's now going to be upsold within that store because she's had this unique experience created for them. And this is all about when that customer enters your store or your hotel or your restaurant, it's about understanding what you should be doing with them. Who should greet them? And do you know the different ways in which they should be treated based upon how they feel they should be valued? So, it all sounds fantastic, but how do you actually get, your organization from your current state to your desired level? What we're going to do is going to show you 4 steps, really to help you achieve this dynamic single view of the customer, which is based around modernizing the operating environment in order to make customer engagements more data centric. So not about, hey, let's just put it all into a data warehouse. Let's have a view to be able to look at this and choose a campaign in 2 weeks and build it on that and then pull off data that's 3 weeks old. What we want to look at is how can you get this real-time engagement? So the first thing that you need to do is to look to align your organization around a digital transformation. Now, a lot of organizations are not aligned around what it means to actually create that single view of the customer, or why they should even create that single view. Now, we've found that a lot of brands have tried to solve their digital transformation by essentially layering in technology across their organization. There's a big investment put in at the beginning. Now they want to find things that will fit into it. Let's layer on top of it. Let's add modules to it. And in a way, it's almost as if organizations should take a step back and have a look at how technology may change the way that they engage with customers, rather than actually what's going on internally, so more rethinking how their organization teams should be structured to respond to the demands of customers. Now, the architecture for marketing technology or for solutions within the context of organizations tends to reflect the structure of that organization in particular. Now, the barriers then that get introduced are very much human barriers rather than technology. So we find that it's important, the first step really is to think about how your organization needs to be aligned around the digital transformation, as opposed to aligning the digital transformation around your organization. It's 2 really different trains of thought, but this is about actually, let's start at the customer and then work back into our organization. Now, by creating the concept of digital transformation within your organization and setting yourself some goals to relate to that transformation, one of which is to achieve the single view of the customer for operations, for marketing, for sales enablement, for customer service, etc., you can better set yourself up for success when it comes to not only that particular initiative, but also future initiatives related to how technology can transform you. So for all sort of areas, it's more about actually, what do we want the technology to achieve and how can we work that back, rather than, hey, what's going to fit in with us? The second step is to really come to an agreement across your team to establish what you feel is the golden record of customer engagement. And what I mean by this is defining the type of data that needs to become available in real time in order to power your different customer engagement channels. Now, a lot of the times, each groups within an organization will have different data needs in relation to the customers. Buy-in will want to know more around product, want to know what's selling quickest, what's being the most effective. You may have your e-commerce team wants to know about what people spend the most amount of time on. Now, customer care may want to have different needs to them, but often there is an overlap in this information that's required. So if businesses and organizations can come to an agreement on what data they need to store and how they need to normalize that data across the business, then if they understand what is the contract between their various business units for sharing that data across the organization and what data is necessary to power positive customer experiences across channels, whether it's in customer care or retail on your website. If you can get to that agreement, so you can agree where the data should be flowing and understand it, that's a great second step for you to be taking. The third step that we then suggest is then inventing ways in which to motivate your customers to really lean in to identify themselves. So let's look at this being a two-way thing. You want to get more information from them. You want them to tell them more about yourselves. You want them to engage more with you. You need to motivate them. So there's a lot of pitfalls when it comes to customer engagement, when it comes to trying to estimate who the customer is. And identity resolution is very much a challenge for businesses. So by understanding how data is connected to a particular individual and a particular customer, it tends to fall into two classical buckets. One is statistical identification. So you're looking at basically information that's being drawn off the web for you, information that's being drawn off that individual. And the other is deterministic identification. Now, a lot of businesses spend a lot of time with statistical information, and that really creates issues with the data, because the message around the statistical approximation of customer identity tends to have a lot of hold, and the accuracy level tends to be around 30 to 40% in the best case. So as a result, there's a lot of misidentification of customers. Now, 30 to 40% isn't good enough. You need to be hitting much stronger numbers than that, and data is what's causing the issue. So in order to achieve the personalization necessary to truly drive great engagement with the brand, the best way is to find ways for your customers to opt into experiences. Now, these could come from a variety of different ways. They could come from, the simple perspective of downloading a mobile app, opting into certain types of personalized communications, all the way up to getting involved in some sort of incentive or a loyalty and reward program. Now, Forbes reported that 80% of consumers were positively influenced into sharing personal data with companies if they received special offers or data-enabled benefits. So by putting things in like reward points, product recommendations, what you get is creating systems that are effective to really cause a recurring reason for an individual to communicate with you and to engage with you. The fourth step is to then start to look to leverage your technology in order to reduce the latency and the amount of time it takes to share that golden record. So you understand, the first three steps, you've got the data in order, you're sharing the data across the organization, you understand what that golden record is. Now what you need to do is say, okay, how can we now reduce the time it takes us from capturing information on that individual to put in the right piece of information in front of that individual? The way to do this is when you're evaluating new marketing systems and introducing new systems into your technology stack, typically it increases the latency that it takes to recognize who the customer is and to deliver the value of that customer. For me, that's wrong. For me, it should be actually, when you're evaluating it, it should be, look, we need to find things that's going to do the opposite. We need to find technology that is going to decrease the amount of time that it takes to share this information. We know this information is golden on this individual. We're sharing it across the business. We know what needs to be put in front of them. We now need to shorten the amount of time it takes to do that. And a great example of that would be that, let's say I called customer service because I had an issue with a product, and I was driving in my car at the time, and I was driving to the nearest store. And then I walk into the store with the same problem. Now, technology now enables it so that the agent that I speak to at the store would actually be aware that I just called customer service, or at least they should. For most businesses, this particular use case is just simply not achievable. And in many cases, it's a new engagement. So I would get frustrated. I've been speaking to customer services. I've now said, right, I go and talk to somebody in the store, and I have to start my story again. I have to repeat everything again. Where actually technology exists to allow the customer service representative on the phone to actually introduce me to the agent in the store who's going to be made available for me within the next few minutes when I arrive. They can be aware of my problem, be ready to help me. And by reducing the latency, effectively by selecting the right technology, this allows a business to share the information necessary across the organization. And now I've achieved that real moment of delight as a customer because I'm receiving the level of service that not only I want, but I expect. And each customer is very different. So if you start to get, if you're successful at aligning your organization around digital transformation, and you've come to an agreement on how to establish this golden record, and you've also come up with different methods to get your customers to lean in and identify themselves, now is the time to leverage that technology that's going to reduce the amount of time it takes to share that across the organization. So every time you look at technology to solve a particular problem, it has the potential of creating more latency and more technical debt within your organization. So every time you deploy technology, you're effectively opening a new bank account, and that bank account could potentially have high fees, it could have a low interest rate, and in return, you're not going to get much out of it. So it takes a lot more sense to consolidate everything around very specific types of accounts that are going to work the best for you when it comes to increasing your accessibility to it, as well as gaining the best possible returns. So I would really advise that when you're investing in technology, make sure that you're choosing technology that's going to create more speed in terms of how the data flows within your organization, and will also create more consistency around how that data flows within your organization. So you've done that, you've achieved that, you've got a dynamic single view of the customer. Now what should you do with that? I mean, you're now capable of viewing this customer behavior in context. You're able to view not only the state of the customer, that they had a particular issue, that they bought a particular product, but also where they bought that product and when they bought that product. If they returned that product, did they call customer service? What was the conversation? What was the outcome of that call? Now, it's not just viewing who the customer is, which is important now, but also viewing that in context of all the other actions and activities and characteristics that allow you to create that better customer experience. If you can extend that customer view to machines, this allows you to take advantage of the future things like chatbots for customer care, the enriching the experience based on AI or machine learning. And these things, they're just not possible until you can view customer behavior in context. So now we've got the ability to see that contextual view. What is happening with a customer from a behavioral and transactional perspective? We can now apply rules of engagement that would allow us to create new experiences for the customers. These rules of engagement, for instance, may be related to the type of personal experience they get when they shop at retail. So maybe when a particular individual who's a member of your loyalty program checks in at your hotel, they get a text message triggered to one of their agents in the hotel to let them know that one of their most valuable guests has just arrived. That type of rule-based engagement can effectively trigger new types of experiences for customers that didn't exist before, because now you've got a context of who they are and what they're doing in relation to your business. So for the last decade and a half, we mentioned this earlier, people have talked about predictive analytics. They've talked about the promise of the next best offer. Actually, I find that customer engagement needs to be beyond incentives, beyond offers. It needs to go to the next best experience. Now, some consumers, it's as simple as saying hello and recognizing who they are when they enter into your brand or your retail location. Every morning when I go into the office, I always get a coffee from a particular store. And when I walk in, they say, "Hey, Brett, would you like your flat white this morning?" And I'll always order it. And I'll go there every day because I get that personal touch. It's in the ever-growing digital world. That human connection is really important. Other consumers, it's a different concept of value. I mean, they may have been putting a lot into your brand and they want to receive value in return. That value could be delivered from the context of the next best offer. But ultimately, what a lot of brands are trying to do to solve is personalization around making, that when we do provide the next best experience, the cost of providing the next best experience will be going towards some potential outcome that is incremental to the business and incremental to the consumer engagement and their happiness with the brand. So by using machine learning, AI and statistical analysis on top of the contextual data that you have around this golden record, you're now able to achieve an output where the next best thing is applied to the correct segments for your brand to drive those goals. we've been, a lot of businesses we've been working with, we've really been seeing an evolution to the next best action. The next best thing that we should be doing with the customer, and being able to measure how that particular action influences the goals that we have as a business. Now, those goals might be acquisition, they could be sales, they could be cross-sell, they could be upsell, they could be increased loyalty and retention, or it could be related to customer care or saving a customer, preventing churn. Conversation in a retail environment may be worth much more than an incentive driving value around increased share of wallet or increased basket size. So we find it's very, very different as the action that you should be putting in front of people. So, there's a lot of pitfalls that come with this, and we're sort of nearly coming to the end of this webinar now. So I just wanted to address some cautionary details that you may have when it comes to deploying this sort of technology. And the first pitfall really is that, as we mentioned before, that the architecture of your technology stack tends to be reflective of the design of your organization, the structure of your organization, rather than the other way around. And a major pitfall that we see is that people try to use one technology to solve many, many problems, going for the suite rather than the point solution. But actually, we find it's more about making sure that you select the right technology for the right jobs, and make sure that you're deploying the technologies that go beyond the organizational structure that you currently have within your company. It's not always about resource, actually, because there's a lot of technologies out there that can be incredibly resource light, have very little lift in, that won't be disruptive to existing technology, and actually can free up resource to perform other tasks within the organization. But it's not easy. I mean, it can be made easier if you avoid some of the pitfalls that come with moving quickly around trying to achieve a particular type of tech prowess. But another pitfall that we see is that organizations are often challenged by taking a sort of a NAD focus on digital transformation. Many organizations fail to recognize that technology and the use of it may depend on the changes to their organizational structures and how they actually do business. So it's not enough in some cases to just simply deploy technology across your current organizational structure. We find that sometimes it's important, in order to really recognize value in the technology, to change your organization, to best take advantage of the technology that's available. Even when starting that first step to commit a digital transformation, it's really important to create a digital transformation team that exists cross-functionally across all areas of your business, all areas where that data is going to need to flow to. And provides that context on how each individual business team can leverage the technology today, and how that technology could also be a force multiplier for them in the future if the use of that technology was to change. I mean, can the technology scale with you? Can it evolve with you and evolve with your strategies? And having that digital transformation team can be connected to really the same types of business goals that the rest of the business is connected to. And this will align the organization around how it needs to change and ultimately bring that digital transformation. I suppose if we're looking specifically in data management and the marketing technology space, there's many, many companies around with a high level of expertise of using and leverage very specific technologies to solve problems for your organization. They've invested in some cases hundreds of $millions in perfecting, managing, deploying and operationalizing these technologies. But we also come into organizations and find that they've decided to build their own custom solutions with similar technology without actually recognizing the amount of investment that they would need to make in order to be experts at that technology. I mean, hey, that's why we've seen the evolution of SaaS and why it's become so popular. We also find in a lot of organizations, there's cases where there's a lot of technical debt, a lot of CapEx that's gone into it. They've gone down the build versus buy road. We personally recommend partnering with the best companies in the world around the different domains in order to achieve and eliminate technical debt within your organization, and really to avoid that pitfall of going in on your own and trying to develop that internal expertise, because this landscape is changing rapidly, incredibly rapidly. And that kind of concludes my thoughts on single customer view and what you can achieve from it. The last two slides, of course, to end on are just a little bit about Session M, who we are and where we come from. We're a a SaaS-based customer engagement platform, which has essentially been designed to help B2C marketers to build stronger, more valuable relationships with their customers. We're backed by world-class investors, including Salesforce. In fact, we are Salesforce's official loyalty cloud. And we're proud to work with some of the leading global brands in all verticals, powering things like the award-winning My Starbucks loyalty program, powering loyalty and rewards for and data optimization for the likes of Coca-Cola, Nike, McDonald's. Really, our platform focuses on maximizing the value and the lifetime value of your customers. At a really, really high level, we do three things. We unify and operationalize your customer data in real time. And this is data based on what we can observe. So activities that are taking part on your site and on your properties, what fences they're tripping and the likes, what data they declare to us, and so what they've actually told us about themselves, and also what's the learned data. So what's product SKUs they'd be interested in, what's going to be the lifetime value of them, the RFM model, what's their propensity to churn. We then enable you to take fast action on that data by delivering highly personalized messaging offers and experiences across all channels. And then finally, we enable you to extend the lifetime and value of your customer relationships with programmatic loyalty solutions. As the steps show you here, ultimately it all starts with the data. So I thank you, everyone that's stayed the duration here. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have now at this stage.
Lovely, thank you, Brett. That was really interesting. I have a few questions. They come in at various stages while you've been talking, so I'll try and sort of organise them sort of roughly into the sort of chronology of what you did. One of the early questions we had, I think, when you were talking about the vast amount of siloed data and all the stuff that's coming into people, is artificial intelligence and machine learning a relevant tool, and how does that fit into what you're talking about?
So the short answer is yes, it is a relevant tool. The long answer is that actually you need to make sure your data is flowing in the correct way before you can even consider machine learning or artificial intelligence. You want to learn about all the data. So if you've got the data feeding through a platform for data optimization, then there will be a strong degree of machine learning in there. When we talk about the observed data, the declared data, and the learned data, the learned data is actually what the machine is learning. So what's the customer viewing? Let's use a coffee shop example. What are they buying every day? And then, are they tripping a geofence every day? Are they tripping the geofence? Are they coming into a particular coffee shop each morning? Have they suddenly stopped coming? Have they changed their drinking habits with the seasons? And by the machine learning that, it can actually start. You can say, okay, let's send an offer to somebody that's got an 80% propensity to churn, or that hasn't tripped a geofence at our store in the last 2 weeks, but has been in the area or hasn't purchased a product from us in the last month and is likely to churn, but we'll find this offer of relevance. I mean, you can literally take it from being very, very simple on your personalization to using machine learning to be highly, highly targeted with your one-to-one personalization.
Great. I think building on that, I mean, forgive me, you might have to repeat yourself, but it leads us to sort of another question on what sort of other tech investment is required for business to achieve this single view of the customer.
So it depends what the business considers as the single view of the customer. So actually, with technology nowadays, you can use a data optimization platform without having a CRM. One of the days where you actually have to have that CRM in place to put all the data in it, considering a data warehouse. But actually, the only real technology that you'd need to invest in is actually that data optimization platform, because you're already going to have, if you imagine your technology stack, on your left-hand side, you're going to have your silos of data, and you're going to have your various pots of data there, and a CRM if you have one. And on the right-hand side, you're going to have your marketing technology. You're going to have your email service provider. You're going to have your push data. You're going to have your SMS data provider. You're going to have your website. data optimization platform would sit in the middle of those. So actually, it's just a case of getting those data feeds to come into there. And it's what's important to understand is what data optimization platforms are built on, or what they certainly should be built on, is a non-SQL database. So instead of being a relational database that's restricted by fields or rows, an optimization database for data is built on non-SQL. So it's a living, breathing database where you can put an unlimited amount of data alongside a user profile in a varied degree of formats. And when you think that a social profile is 150 points of unstructured data, you just simply can't feed that into a straightforward CRM. So data optimization platform will create that living, breathing customer profile that's then actioned upon from those marketing tools. So it's not so much a case of having to invest in additional technology aside from that.
Okay, great. And I think you did touch upon this, but there's a question on it anyway about trying to achieve this sort of golden record that you share across the company. Does that involve then a restructuring of the organisation of the business and business processes and who reports to whom and that sort of thing? Is it sort of an organisational rethink as well as a technological one?
It's an organisational rethink from a future perspective. As to how you're going to start to build up departments. But if you imagine that you've got, let's say you've got 3 departments. Let's look at the simple ones to make this an easy analogy. You've got your sales department, you've got your service department, and you've got your product department. Now, sales are going to want points 1 to 10 of data. Service are going to want points 3 to 15 of data, and product are going to want points 9 to 20 of data. So the fact of the matter is your golden record is going to be made up of the data points that those individuals need. So make sure that everybody's getting the same data and also getting the data they require in that single customer view, and make sure that it's feeding into their systems to become actionable. Now, it's not so much about changing the organizational structure as it is, but it's more about actually making that you're looking at it from above and realizing that actually you can use technology as you grow this organization. You can use technology within that, and the structure of it going forward should be looked at in that respect.
Brilliant. And one last question. What are the core features that people should be looking for in technology partners to help deliver this?
Oh, great question. So core features, they need to be incredibly scalable. I would 100% advise SaaS-based technology. Anything that's installed is going to be obsolete within a couple of years. It's evolving immensely. Make sure any technology that you're looking at is based on a non-SQL platform. Anything that's based on a relational database or even worst case scenario, a flat file it's just simply not going to handle the vast amount of data that you want to put in it, and you'll just end up with more silos. Find a platform that's got very, very open APIs that uses typically REST APIs, because that's going to avoid any pitfalls of integrating with existing technology that you have. You really don't want it to be disruptive. And I guess the other point is that, you know, if you're really looking to achieve the utopia here, then make sure it's a provider that can do this engagement in near to real time. And when I say near to real time, I mean, you know, as close to 500 milliseconds. Even something that takes 2 minutes to process can lose that golden moment of engagement for you.
Brilliant. That's really interesting. That sort of wraps it up for questions that we've had sent in. I'm curious as to one of the points you made was how do you encourage customers to give you insights about themselves? How on earth do you do that? Because obviously they want this personal service, but on the other hand, they don't really want to share vast amounts of data. What can you do to sort of encourage people to actually give you usable stuff that you can use?
Yeah, great question. So look, it's the trade-off is always about what do I want them to do that's valuable for my website or my brand or my store. what is the action that I want them to take? And then, like you say, how do you get them to take that action? Well, I've found that when you're looking to reward people, to drive behavior, there's one of 4 things that you can use, and it's an acronym that I call PASS. And it stands for power, access, status, and stuff. So we'll start with stuff because that's the lowest one actually. And stuff is just really just giving them anything of the monetary value, giving them a discount, giving them, a 10% discount to sign up to our newsletter is the old traditional one. It's just giving them stuff. But actually it's the power, the access, and the status that's most important. If you give them power in the format that they're able to do something, they're able to perform a task. If they do this, it's giving them the ability to do something. That's one way to do it. Access is an incredibly strong one. I mean, if you can say, by giving us this information, you'll be able to access this. We can show you what's behind door number 2. So it's tapping into their intrigue. And the other one with status is effectively telling them how great they are. And finding ways to tell everyone else how great they are as well. This could be done through social, it could be done through customer services. There's many different ways. It's very dependent on what the brand is, what the reach is that they're looking to get to, their core audience, and then first of all, by understanding who those individuals are, that will then allow you to put the right actions in front of them to drive them to provide you with more data, because you're going to know what they want to see.
Brilliant. Excellent stuff. Well, some excellent information in there. Lots to take away and mull over. That's been really interesting. So thank you very much, Brett, for taking the time to do that. Thank you to the audience for listening. As I said at the beginning, there will be a recording of the webinar with the slides and everything available in the coming days on the Internet Retailing website. Everyone who registered for the webinar will be sent a copy. And so just remains to say once again, thank you to Brett and Session M, and thank you to you for attending. And we'll speak to you again soon. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thanks, Paul.